Welcome to the Morning English Podcast. Listen, learn, and speak English daily.
So you know that feeling when it is maybe 2 in the morning.
Oh, yeah. The absolute worst time to be awake.
Right. The house is completely quiet. Maybe the glow of a street lamp is sort of, filtering through the blinds. And you are just staring at the ceiling, agonizing over a massive life choice.
Just completely trapped in your own head.
Exactly. Like maybe it is a terrifying career pivot you are thinking about making.
Or you are standing on the precipice of ending a really long-term relationship.
Yeah, or even a huge life-altering financial leap. Like buying a house you are just really not sure you can afford.
Oh, that is a stressful one.
It is. And your brain is just spinning in circles, right?
Yeah.
You are running through the exact same list of pros and cons over and over and over again.
Until the words literally lose all their meaning. It is the classic midnight mental treadmill.
The mental treadmill, yes.
We have all been trapped in that specific loop, feeling entirely isolated by just the sheer weight of a decision. When you are in that space, the dilemma feels like, almost like a physical object sitting right on your chest.
It really does. It is suffocating.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. When we finally hit our breaking point, right? When we realize we just cannot carry that object alone anymore.
If you finally reach out to talk to someone.
Right. We decide to pick up the phone or we go talk to a friend. We put almost all of our cognitive energy into the what?
The facts.
Exactly. What are the raw facts of the situation? What are the financial implications? Like, what is the most logical, defensible choice I can make here?
We build these really elaborate mental spreadsheets.
Yes, spreadsheets. But we rarely, and I mean almost never, stop to think about the how.
Right.
Like, how does the actual literal language we use to describe our problem fundamentally shape the decision itself?
Which is, honestly, a massive blind spot in our daily lives. The specific words we select in those moments of vulnerability and, the physical tone we use to deliver them, they are doing an incredible amount of heavy lifting behind the scenes.
Way more than we realize.
Way more. They aren't merely communicating the parameters of the problem to another person. They are actually actively framing the reality of the dilemma in real time.
Wow.
Yeah, the language dictates the emotional boundaries of the conversation before the other person even has a chance to respond.
And that brings us to today's source material, which is, I have to say, one of the most surprising and just profound documents we have ever analyzed on this deep dive.
It really is an unexpected goldmine.
It is.
Yeah.
Because if I told you we were going to spend the next hour decoding the deepest psychological structures of human decision-making and the mechanics of empathy and all these hidden rules of interpersonal communication, you would probably expect us to be reading from, like, a dense, peer-reviewed neuroscience journal.
Or perhaps some comprehensive clinical manual on cognitive behavioral therapy. You would expect a lot of academic jargon.
Right, totally. But instead, today's source is actually a comprehensive guide originally designed to teach English learners how to talk about making difficult decisions.
Which is so wild.
It is. It is, by all outward appearances, just an educational framework. A lesson plan designed for non-native speakers to navigate conversational English.
Right, but when you strip away that classroom context and you look really closely at the architecture of the lesson, it is actually a brilliantly distilled psychological map.
Yeah.
It breaks down our emotional processing, our cultural values, and the hidden, intricate mechanics of how human beings seek and offer help.
It is incredible.
The document operates as a mirror, really, because on the surface, it is just categorizing vocabulary, right?
Right, like teaching a learner when to use the noun option versus the adjective nervous.
Exactly. But underneath that functional layer, it completely exposes the subconscious rules of engagement that native speakers rely on every single day. It highlights these invisible social contracts we navigate without ever realizing it.
So our mission today for you, the listener, is to decode this anatomy of a dilemma.
I love that phrase.
We are going to unpack the hidden conversational structures we instinctively rely on when we're just drowning in uncertainty. We will examine the specific vocabulary toolkits we use, dissect the subtle tonal shifts that act as, like, auditory flare guns for help.
Oh, that is a great way to put it.
And reveal what all these linguistic patterns tell us about empathy, autonomy, and culture. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even start?
Well, the most logical place to begin is with the structural blueprint of these conversations.
Okay.
The source makes a fascinating assertion right out of the gate. It claims that conversations about difficult decisions are not random.
They seem random when you're in them.
Oh, they feel incredibly chaotic. But whether you are agonizing over studying abroad or ending a toxic relationship or, taking a massive financial risk, the text argues that these conversations actually follow a highly predictable, rigidly sequenced 6-step structure.
And the text lays those steps out with clinical precision, right? Let me pull them up.
Go for it.
Step 1, introducing the problem. Step 2, expressing feelings. Step 3, asking for advice. Step 4, giving opinions. Step 5, exploring options. And finally, Step 6, reaching a conclusion.
It basically frames the interaction as a choreography.
Choreography. Yeah.
When we are thrust into the chaos of a life-altering choice, we intuitively rely on the sequence to march ourselves from confusion to clarity.
So let's actually walk through these steps because the source provides a fantastic case study to illustrate this architecture.
Yes, the case study is perfect.
It sets up a sample scenario between two characters. One character is facing a classic, universally understood dilemma.
Right.
They've just received a significantly higher paying job offer in a brand new city.
But there is always a but.
There is always a but. Accepting the offer means moving far away from their tight-knit family.
So it is the ultimate collision of career growth versus personal ties.
Exactly. And that scenario is the perfect stress test for this framework because it inherently pits cold logic against deep emotion.
Right. The higher salary and the career advancement, that represents the logical pull. And the comfort of home, the proximity to loved ones, that represents the emotional anchor. And if you map this specific conflict onto that 6-step structure, the hidden genius of the sequence reveals itself almost immediately.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, pay close attention to the order of operations. Step 1 is introducing the problem. The character announces the job offer and the relocation.
Right, just getting the facts on the table.
Exactly. But notice what must happen immediately afterward. Step 2 is expressing feelings. And crucially, it comes long before Step 5, which is exploring options.
Okay, wait, I want to isolate what you just said because this sequence feels like the crux of so much human miscommunication.
It really is.
The expression of feelings must precede the exploration of options.
Absolutely. The psychology behind that ordering is paramount. By formally expressing feelings as the mandatory second step, this linguistic structure acts as a defense mechanism against a phenomenon psychologists refer to as the fix-it trap.
Oh, man, the fix-it trap.
You know it well.
I need to pause here because I have a confession to make. I am incredibly guilty of falling into this trap, and I think a lot of our listeners will totally relate to this.
Oh, we all do it.
Let me tell you about a time I completely ruined a conversation because I didn't understand this sequence.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, a few years ago, a very close friend called me, clearly distressed. She had just been offered a promotion that required her to manage a team in a different time zone.
Okay, big change.
Huge.
Yeah.
And it meant her work hours were going to completely upend her marriage and her time with her kids. She was crying. She said to me, I don't know what to do. The money is life-changing, but I feel like I am going to lose my family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you know what I did?
Let me guess. You immediately started doing the math.
I became a human calculator. I didn't even acknowledge the tears. I instantly said, okay, let's look at the numbers. What's the salary bump? Can you afford a nanny with the extra income? Let's map out a new daily schedule for you and your husband.
Oh, no. You skipped right to Step 5.
I went straight to exploring options. I started firing off spreadsheets and logistical action plans. I thought I was being the ultimate supportive friend, I was solving the puzzle.
And how did she react?
She just went completely silent on the other end of the phone. The energy in the conversation died instantly, and she ended the call a few minutes later. I had completely bypassed Step 2.
That anecdote perfectly encapsulates the danger of the fix-it trap.
It was terrible.
When we rush to offer logical solutions, when we skip straight to exploring options, we inadvertently invalidate the profound emotional weight of the person's choice.
Yeah.
By immediately asking about the salary difference and the cost of a nanny, you completely failed to acknowledge her grief and her guilt and her anxiety. You tried to solve a math problem, but she was calling you about an emotional crisis.
I was trying to build the roof before the foundation was even poured. And the entire conversation collapsed because of it.
Because the human brain simply cannot process logical options when the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, is overwhelmed by threat or anxiety.
It literally shuts down the logic.
Completely. The expressing feeling step isn't just polite filler, it is a neurological necessity. The person needs to offload the emotional pressure before their prefrontal cortex can engage with your logistical spreadsheets.
Wow.
If you don't validate the feeling first, your solutions will always be perceived as dismissive. Always.
But okay, consider the alternative perspective here, just to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
I hear this 6-step framework. Introduce problem, express feelings, ask advice, give opinion, explore options, conclude, and I have to push back a little.
Go ahead.
Life is messy, right? Human beings are irrational. Do real, raw conversations actually follow this sanitized textbook formula?
That is a fair question.
Like, when two people are sitting in a diner at midnight crying over a cup of cold coffee, are they really executing this rigid choreography? Or is this just a neat artificial construct designed solely to make a language lesson digestible for beginners?
This skepticism is completely warranted. Real conversations are absolutely chaotic. They loop back on themselves, they stall out in silence, they derail into completely unrelated tangents.
Right.
But you have to view this 6-step structure not as a literal transcript of every conversation, but as the ideal psychological framework for conflict resolution. It operates as an archetype.
Okay, an archetype.
Even in the messiest, most tear-filled diner conversation, if you observe closely, you will see the participants subconsciously attempting to hit these exact beats.
Like an invisible scaffolding holding up a very crooked building.
Precisely. And we know the scaffolding is real because of what happens when we remove a piece of it.
Like my phone call.
Exactly like your phone call. When a conversation breaks down into a screaming match, or when someone leaves feeling entirely unheard just like your friend did, it is almost always because one of these steps was skipped or rushed.
It is so true.
The structure reveals how the human mind subconsciously attempts to use language to wrangle the chaos of a dilemma into manageable, sequential phases. It is our innate attempt to bring order to emotional entropy.
Which brings us to the tools we use to build that scaffolding. Because to successfully navigate from introducing the problem all the way to reaching a conclusion, communicators need a highly specific vocabulary.
They do.
And this leads us directly into the second major theme of the source material, the linguistics of uncertainty.
The source text deconstructs this brilliantly. It doesn't just present a massive, overwhelming list of vocabulary words to memorize. It categorizes decision-making language into distinct functional toolkits.
Toolkits.
Yeah, it treats words like implements designed for very specific conversational jobs.
I really love this framing of conversational toolkits. Let's dig into the first one, the basic toolkit.
Okay.
This includes words like decision, option, risk, and benefit. These are essentially the foundational nouns of the conversation, right? They act as the structural beams of the dilemma.
Right, they establish the physical parameters of the problem, but you cannot build a house with just structural beams. You need the walls, the texture, the environment. That is where the emotional toolkit comes in. This toolkit is entirely composed of adjectives. Confused, nervous, doubtful, stressed, overwhelmed.
The messy stuff.
Exactly. These words communicate the internal weather of the speaker. And then finally, you have the reasoning toolkit, which is dominated by analytical verbs: consider, compare, evaluate, prioritize.
What is truly compelling to me is how we intuitively combine these different tools to communicate complex mental states.
Oh, absolutely.
The source highlights universally understood phrases like, I'm stuck between two options. When you actually pause and look at the phrase, I'm stuck, it is a visceral, physical metaphor.
Yes, it is.
You are not literally stuck in mud, but you are using a physical concept to articulate cognitive paralysis. You are expressing that the divergence of your path has physically trapped you.
The metaphor of being stuck perfectly conveys a complete loss of forward momentum. And regaining that momentum requires an incredibly delicate linguistic touch.
Right.
But the text introduces a variable here that supersedes the vocabulary entirely.
Oh, the tone.
Yes. It emphasizes that the words are merely the vehicle, but the actual driver of the meaning is the tone.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
It does.
Because the source material provides explicit, detailed notes on how vocal tone fundamentally alters the delivery of these toolkits. It notes that a rising tone indicates uncertainty, a calm, flat tone demonstrates confidence, and a slowed pace of speech signals careful, deliberate thinking. To me, tone acts as a secondary, invisible language that is layered directly over the literal definitions of the words.
That is exactly what it is.
Think about the physical mechanics of speech. Doesn't changing the speed or the pitch of your voice completely rewrite the literal meaning of the sentence?
It absolutely overrides the literal meaning. Tone is the ultimate context provider.
Let's take the phrase, I don't know. If I am talking to a friend and I say, I don't know, rapidly, with a sharp downward inflection, I don't know, I'm dismissing the topic entirely.
Right. The translation is, stop asking me, leave me alone. This conversation is over.
Exactly. But if I use the exact same 3 words and I say them slowly, stretching out the vowels, and I raise my pitch at the end, I don't know, it transforms from a wall into an open door.
It completely changes.
It becomes an invitation. It is a plea for the other person to step in and help me figure it out.
What's fascinating here is the underlying evolutionary physiology of what you are describing.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, let's take the pacing first. Slow speech is not just a stylistic preference, it is a physical manifestation of cognitive load.
Cognitive load.
Right. When you speak slowly, your brain is actively working harder. It is frantically allocating resources to weigh complex, competing variables in real time. The processing power is actually being diverted from speech generation to problem solving.
That is wild.
And because humans are deeply social, empathetic creatures, when a listener hears that slow, deliberate pacing, their own brain recognizes that cognitive struggle.
Oh, wow.
It triggers an automatic empathetic response. We are biologically programmed to step in when we hear a fellow human's brain straining under pressure.
So we can literally hear the sound of someone else's cognitive load.
We can.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Our ears are tuned to the frequency of mental struggle.
And we are equally tuned to pitch. That rising tone you mentioned, the one the source text associates with uncertainty.
Yeah.
In linguistics, this is often referred to as uptalk or high rising terminal.
Okay.
When you place a rising intonation at the end of a declarative statement, you fundamentally alter its grammatical function. You turn a statement into a question.
Right, like making it a request for input.
Exactly. It acts as an auditory white flag. It signals vulnerability. It tells the listener, I lack the conviction to make this a hard statement, so I am relying on you to confirm or deny it.
So, returning to our case study with the job offer. If the character says, I think I should take the job, with that rising pitch at the end, they are not stating a plan.
Not at all.
They're waving that white flag and saying, please validate this choice, or please give me a reason to stay.
They are basically handing the listener the conversational steering wheel.
Wow.
Which naturally bridges us to the next massive component of this dynamic. How is the listener supposed to react once they are handed the wheel?
That is the big question.
Right. The moment that auditory white flag goes up, the response is entirely governed by a complex web of cultural expectations.
And the source text does not shy away from this at all. It dives headfirst into what it calls emotional intelligence in conversation.
It is a great section.
It explicitly instructs learners on the importance of showing empathy and avoiding judgment. But where it gets truly granular is in its section on the cultural aspects of decision-making.
Yes.
It makes a point to note that in English-speaking environments, and particularly in Western cultures, there is an extraordinarily high premium placed on independence, personal choice, and the concept of the self-made decision.
This is a vital inclusion for a language learner, honestly. But I would argue it is even more illuminating for native speakers who are completely blind to their own cultural biases.
Oh, completely.
The cultural water we swim in dictates the parameters of how we are allowed to offer help.
Let's explore that.
Well, let's contrast it. In many high-context or collectivist cultures, decisions are inherently communal.
Right.
If you are struggling with a career choice, it might be perfectly acceptable and actually expected for an elder, a parent, or a senior colleague to simply instruct you on the correct path.
They just tell you what to do.
Exactly. The burden of the choice is shared by the community. But in environments that fiercely prize individualism, offering a direct command is perceived as a severe violation of personal boundaries.
It is seen as an insult to their autonomy. You are basically stealing their agency.
Yes.
To navigate this minefield, the text highlights specific supportive phrases. It teaches learners to use validating statements like, I understand why you feel that way, or the pacing phrase, take your time.
Which lowers the pressure.
Right. But the most fascinating tool it highlights is the classic advice-giving structure. If I were you, I would.
The conditional hypothetical.
Yeah.
It is the absolute cornerstone of Western advice giving.
But let's test that theory, because I spot a massive contradiction here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If English-speaking cultures are so fiercely protective of independence and personal choice, isn't giving advice inherently presumptuous. Isn't saying, if I were you, actually a bit bossy. You're essentially saying, I possess superior judgment. Step aside and let me show you how a smart person handles this. How does that respect autonomy?
That is a brilliant observation, and it cuts straight to the heart of the cultural paradox we are navigating.
It just seems so contradictory.
On the surface, it absolutely sounds arrogant, but functionally, the phrase, if I were you, is a masterclass in linguistic diplomacy.
Really?
Yes, it is a brilliant workaround designed specifically to solve the contradiction you just pointed out. Think about the mechanical function of the phrase. By starting with, if I were, the advisor completely removes the burden of action from the person facing the dilemma.
Okay.
They are not issuing a command. They are not saying, you must do this. They are offering a highly specific solution, but they are doing it by placing themselves inside a hypothetical simulation.
Oh, they're building a parallel universe.
Exactly. They are saying, let me temporarily step into your shoes. Let me adopt your variables, your fears, and your goals, run them through my own cognitive operating system, and report back on the output I generate.
Wow, that is such a cool way to look at it.
By framing the advice as a hypothetical narrative about themselves, they entirely preserve the actual decision maker's autonomy.
Because it is not about the decision maker anymore. It is about the advisor in this fake scenario.
Right. The person is free to look at this hypothetical simulation and say, yes, that looks right, or no, you don't understand my variables. It allows the friend to fulfill the cultural requirement of being helpful and engaging in open discussion while simultaneously honoring the fiercely guarded boundary of personal independence.
That completely reframes how I view that interaction. It is not an intrusion of ego. It is an offering of temporary shelter.
I love that. Temporary shelter.
You are taking on the risk of the decision in a simulated environment so they don't have to.
Exactly.
For everyone listening right now, I want you to mentally audit your recent conversations. Think about the last time a colleague or a loved one came to you paralyzed by a choice. How often do you accidentally trample on their autonomy by using direct imperative?
We do it all the time without thinking.
How often do you say, you need to dump him, or you have to negotiate for more money? Compare the emotional weight of those commands to the gentler, simulated approach of, if I were you, I might ask for a higher salary. And it's a microscopic shift in vocabulary, but it yields a colossal shift in respect and receptivity.
It changes the entire temperature of the room. When you use imperative verbs like you need it to, the listener's neurological defenses instinctively go up. Their autonomy is being threatened. When you say, if I were you, their defense is lower. They lean in to observe the simulation you are building, but, and this is a big, but to build an accurate simulation, you have to actually understand the nuances of their problem.
Right, you can't just guess.
No.
Yeah.
And this requires a remarkably high degree of active listening, which the source text addresses with surprising depth in its final sections. It pivots away from the words we speak and focuses entirely on the pedagogy of listening.
It provides incredibly practical advice for mastering the meta-conversation, too. It outlines common mistakes that learners make when trying to follow complex dialogue. And the first major trap it identifies is the desperate urge to understand every single word.
Oh, this is such a common trap.
It notes that listeners often paralyze themselves with the fear that if they fail to translate one specific vocabulary word, the entire meaning of the conversation will be lost.
The anxiety of the missing puzzle piece.
Yes.
The text counters this anxiety with a very specific tiered strategy. It explicitly advises listeners to abandon the pursuit of perfect comprehension and instead focus strictly on keywords.
Okay.
It outlines a 3-step listening process. First, listen purely for the general idea or the emotional gist.
Just the vibe, basically.
Right, the vibe. Second, listen again for specific supporting details. And third, engage in an exercise called shadowing, which involves immediately repeating the phrases you hear.
I want to focus intensely on that first mistake, the trap of trying to understand every single word. Because to me, listening to a high-stakes emotional conversation is exactly like looking at a pointillist painting.
Oh, that is a fantastic analogy.
Right. Imagine standing in front of Georges Seurat's famous painting, A Sunday on La Grande Jatte.
Okay, I am picturing it.
The entire massive canvas is constructed from millions of tiny distinct dots of pure color. If you walk right up to the canvas, press your nose against the fabric, and fiercely stare at one single blue dot, you completely obliterate the image.
You see nothing but blue.
You don't see the people relaxing in the park, you don't see the river, you don't see the sunlight, you just see an isolated, meaningless blue dot.
Yeah.
To comprehend the masterpiece, you're required to step back, relax your optical focus, and allow the individual dots to blur together into a cohesive meaning.
That is so true.
Listening to a friend describe a messy, agonizing life choice requires the exact same psychological distance. If you fixate on one specific word, you lose the narrative.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human relationships, that analogy illuminates a profound truth.
Yeah.
This is not merely a tip for someone trying to pass an English proficiency exam. This is a critical diagnosis of why native speakers constantly miscommunicate with their own spouses, family members, and closest friends.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
How often do our most intimate arguments stem from fixating on a single dot on the canvas?
It happens all the time.
Your partner is trying to express a broad feeling of overwhelm, and they happen to use the word always. You always leave the kitchen a mess.
Oh, that is a dangerous word.
Suddenly, you press your nose to the canvas. You aggressively interrogate that single word. Always. Really? What about Tuesday? What about last month?
You completely missed the point.
Exactly. By weaponizing that single semantic choice, you completely miss their overall emotional intent. You miss the broad strokes of exhaustion they were trying to paint for you.
We abandon the emotional reality to win a semantic argument.
Yes.
We ignore the auditory white flag of their tone because we are too busy prosecuting their vocabulary.
Precisely. Which is why the advanced listening tips in the text are so vital for everyone, regardless of their native language. The text suggests practicing by listening to conversations without subtitles, forcing the brain to rely on tone, pacing, and emotional context to predict what comes next.
Right. Getting comfortable with ambiguity.
Predicting the trajectory of a conversation requires you to be so deeply attuned to the other person's emotional state that you can anticipate their needs before they fully articulate them.
And the ultimate tool for developing that attunement is the concept of shadowing, right?
Yes, shadowing.
The text describes shadowing as the practice of repeating phrases out loud immediately after hearing them. In a language learning context, the goal is obvious. It improves pronunciation, cadence, and mechanical fluency. It trains the mouth to form unfamiliar shapes.
But underneath the pedagogical surface, the physical act of shadowing achieves something much more profound.
Okay.
When you role-play these scenarios, when you physically practice saying phrases like, "That sounds incredibly overwhelming," or "Take all the time you need out loud in an empty room," you are not just building linguistic fluency, you are actively building emotional muscle memory.
Emotional muscle memory. That is a stunning concept.
There really is.
You are literally training your vocal cords and your neurological pathways to form the physical shapes of empathy.
You are conditioning your nervous system. Think back to the anecdote you shared about your friend calling you about her job offer.
The spreadsheet disaster.
Right. When a loved one calls you in a state of crisis, your own nervous system experiences a sympathetic spike. You feel their panic.
Yeah, my heart rate definitely went up.
Your fight or flight response activates, which is exactly why you rushed to the fix-it trap and started making spreadsheets. You wanted to neutralize the threat.
I just wanted the bad feeling to go away for both of us.
Exactly. But if you have physically practiced the vocabulary of validation beforehand, if you have shadowed the phrases of empathy, you have pre-programmed a calming response.
Wow.
Your emotional muscle memory takes over. You don't have to scramble through the panic to figure out what to say. The practiced words flow naturally, allowing you to bypass your own anxiety and instantly provide the stable, grounding presence the other person desperately needs.
It is the equivalent of running fire drills for your compassion.
I love that. Yes.
You practice the escape route during the quiet, calm moments, so that when the alarm actually rings and the smoke fills the room, you know exactly where the exits are without having to think. You just move.
And that is the ultimate goal of understanding this conversational architecture. It is about moving through the crisis together safely.
So what does this all mean? Let's zoom all the way out. What have we actually uncovered during this deep dive?
We have covered a lot of ground.
We really have. We began by opening a language guide designed to teach non-native speakers how to survive a conversation about changing jobs or moving abroad.
Right.
By analyzing the architecture of those lessons, we have discovered that talking about difficult decisions is infinitely more complex than a simple transfer of data. It is not about listing pros and cons on a whiteboard.
It is a highly structured, emotionally intelligent, and culturally fraught ritual. It is a shared ritual of empathy and problem solving that requires us to validate feelings before exploring options. It demands that we navigate the vulnerabilities of tone, respect the boundaries of personal autonomy through hypotheticals, and actively listen to the broad emotional painting rather than obsessing over the individual dots of vocabulary.
Whether you have spoken this language every day of your life or you are bravely navigating these conversational waters for the very first time, understanding these underlying psychological structures makes you a vastly superior communicator.
Absolutely.
It makes you a better colleague, a more supportive partner, and a safer confidant. You transform into someone who knows how to hold the heavy weight of someone else's dilemma without instantly dropping it into the fix-it trap.
You learn how to decode the invisible language of human struggle.
Exactly. So we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building upon the source text's final practice activity, but turning the lens inward. The next time you find yourself staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., agonizing over a terrifying choice, and you finally reach the point where you decide to pick up the phone and call a friend, pause for just a moment.
Just a brief pause.
Pay rigorous attention to the exact verbs and the exact tonal pitch you use when you first describe the problem to them.
That is a great exercise.
Are you framing the dilemma strictly as a rigid logical puzzle, relying heavily on reasoning words like evaluate, prioritize, and compare?
Or are you describing it as an unbearable emotional burden, leaning heavily on visceral words like paralyzed, nervous, and overwhelmed?
Because the specific linguistic toolkits you subconsciously reach for in that vulnerable moment might reveal the true nature of your dilemma and the specific answer your heart actually wants, long before your friend even has a chance to say a single word.